about to explode?
New video captures 3 Ford electric pickups in flames in a Dearborn parking lot. These F-150 Lightning fires are reigniting a growing concern over the batteries in electric vehicles.
Ford shut down production of the popular electric truck for 5 weeks following this fire in Dearborn that happened back in February. When the fire was out, this is all that was left of that Lightning truck.
Of our citizens.
I'm angry that you have ignored the bipartisan warnings of Senator Jonathan Lindsay and Ambassadors Hoekstra and Sello earlier this week, and their pleas to evaluate the very clear and present security risks that this project poses to my community, to the state of Michigan, and to the nation at large.
It only took one. It only took just one vote to get approved for the state of Michigan to provide $175 million in taxpayer incentives, despite local residents voicing their concerns to this Chinese EV battery plant, Gotion. I've got a few notes here that I want to share with you before I get into the slides, and it's number one here is clear and present security risks that the project poses to the local community, but the country as a whole when you think about it. Huge benefits for China, major setbacks for Americans really. Slowly overtaking this country from the inside out. And we are literally voting for this to happen and allowing it to happen. Narrowly at that, with one vote deciding. But I don't know if you guys have seen this or heard this. Maybe if you're in you live in Michigan, you've heard about this, maybe not. Interestingly enough, some of the information, some of the news that I share with you all, some of this recently coming out of Chicago, people are saying, I live in Chicago, or I live right outside of Chicago, and I have not heard any of this. Crazy how that could be possible. How could that be the case? But maybe, look, again, just me being honest, maybe you need to shift your focus, okay? Maybe it's there. Maybe it's right in front of you, and you're just not seeing it because you're distracted by scrolling through TikTok or what your neighbor's doing, or, new pair of shoes, new pair of red bottoms you want, or whatever Birkin handbag you're trying to buy. Maybe is what I'm saying. The information is there, but depending on what your focus is, you may not be shared that information, particularly with YouTube and how the algorithm recommends content to you, which is why I typically don't watch any of the channels related to the content that I create. I create it to help you guys and bring you information, keep you ahead of the game, ahead of the curve, better suited for survival, not getting caught off guard, blindsided. But that's not what I really watch, because it would distract me from what I'm trying to do, which is build financial strength, build wealth, passive income, grow businesses, make more money. So ultimately, I bring you guys what I think is important, but also sharing with you the financial and economic and monetary fiduciary component to it, to maybe bring it full circle, well-rounded, paint you a much clearer, better picture. I don't have it pulled up in front of me. I'll get a slide so I can show you guys. But I think Fox is going to pay the largest sum in history to settle it's a slander or a libel suit against them for manipulating the content delivered to their audience to misrepresent and mislead, to make it seem as though there was election fraud. Now, it didn't go to trial. There were very, very important higher up C-suite executives, public figures, popular personalities from the news station, from YouTube, that ultimately won't have to testify. But for the amount of money that they have chosen to settle and not fight it, I think it speaks for itself as far as guilt or innocence. Therefore, I can bring you what is available. I can bring you my take, my opinion. I can bring you some other data, but it's going to be up to you guys to decide what's real, what's fake, what matters to you most, what's important, and what that means for you moving forward each and every single day of your life towards accomplishing your goals. If you're watching this video right now and you're saying to yourself, well, I don't have any goals, I don't have any prospects on the horizon, I just live day to day and, let the chips fall where they may. Well, this may not necessarily be the place for you. I want to connect with the people who want to improve. But let's get into it, folks. 6 months after Michigan business advocates celebrated Gotion Inc.'s $2.36 billion electric vehicle battery factory deal near Big Rapids, questions persist about its ties to China's government and threats that may pose to national security. The move followed concerns raised by some residents and observers who continue to criticize the deal, which includes promises of $715 million of state funding in the form of $540 million in tax breaks and $175 million from the $1.6 billion Strategic Outreach and Attraction Reserve, dubbed SOAR, fund for large-scale Michigan business projects. All told, the company was offered $1.14 billion in incentives, or about 48% of the project's estimated costs. The figure includes state and local costs and at least $50 million from Utilities, Consumers Energy, and ITC Michigan. Now, Republican Senator John DeMoose of Harbor Springs, he said, there's tremendous concern, as you know, related to the growing tensions between the United States and China. And he said this followed Chinese Foreign Minister Qi Gang saying in early March that conflict with the U.S. was inevitable as he defended his country's ties with Russia. That concern extends to Gotion Inc. and its corporate links to China and its Communist Party-led government. Of particular concern is whether it could harm U.S. economic interests. I'm having a hard time finding answers here about Gotion. And you got to think, harm U.S. economic interests. Folks, of all the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars that I've mentioned to you, very, very little of that is going to go to the people who could use it most in Michigan. The people who could use good jobs in Michigan. The people who could use some help from their local government in Michigan. Will it hurt and harm U.S. economic interests? You're damn sure right it will. Locally, for sure. And then globally and internationally, it could even have a much larger impact. State funding for a controversial $2.3 billion electric vehicle battery factory near Big Rapids narrowly passed its last hurdle on Thursday, with the Senate Appropriations Committee approving the transfer of $175 million to support Gotion Incorporated. Again, slowly overtaking this country from the inside out, folks. Thursday's 10-9 committee vote underscores a growing bipartisan discomfort with promoting companies with ties to China and with the state's incentive system, with 3 Democrats, Jeff Irwin of Ann Arbor, Rosemary Bayer of Kego Harbor, and Sylvia Santana of Detroit, joining the 6 Republicans on the committee in opposing the Gotion deal. Opposition, against, not for. The funding is a legacy of the former Republican-led legislature which did not address the award promised to Gotion Inc. last October before the new Democratic legislative leadership took office in January. Anthony and other Democrats said they plan to make changes to the state's incentives offerings though they've released no details. And the vote releases the $175 million to the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which oversees the SOAR fund. Of that, $125 million will be a grant to Gotion after the factory is operating, with $50 million going to the Right Place Economic Development Group in Grand Rapids for site preparation and land acquisition. Now, I'll tell you two things here, folks. Number one is, if you follow the money, if you could even attempt to follow the money, you would never figure out where it went. Okay. Therefore, it's not going to go where they're saying it's going to go. Number one. And this is kind of like the climate credits, the emissions credits that these major countries, these big countries, these corporations, these CEOs, these wealthy billionaires who produce quite possibly some of the most harmful emissions, buying these credits for forest land and trees and things like that, and this, that, and the other, only to find out later that it didn't really exist. They were paying into a fund, lining someone's pockets to do good for the rest of the world, when they were actually doing nothing, and they were just paying off these individuals so that they could allow them to continue to do the harmful things that they've been doing in excess. Meanwhile, forcing upon us to drive electric vehicles and battery-powered cars, although they're going to be extremely expensive to build, extremely expensive to purchase, extremely expensive to operate and charge, even if the grid could potentially support it, which it cannot. And also, last but not least, also creates a shitload of emissions and damaging greenhouse emissions and gases to produce these vehicles using petroleum-based products and machinery and equipment and manufacturing. For what? Really? But the other thing that I want to share with you is that Democrat, Republican, left, right, blue, red, it doesn't matter. All that matters to them is how much money they can make doing the deals that they do, getting the votes that they can, and they can give two shits about you and I.